internationaler zu werden. Wir haben heute 2 englischsprachige Vorträge. Die erste Keynote von Dr. Adele Ladkin. So let's switch to English. Dr. Adele Ladkin is Professor of Tourism Employment in the Department of Tourism and Hospitality at the Bournemouth University in the United Kingdom. And her keynote has the title Successful Tourism Destinations, a Human Resource Perspective. Dr. Ladkin, the stage is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to see so many faces. And I'd like to start by thanking you very much for inviting me to come and give you this keynote address this afternoon. It's my real pleasure to be here, and thank you for giving me the perfect excuse to come back to Vienna. I've been a few times, but not in the last 10 years, so I'm really pleased to be able to be back with you this afternoon. Now, apologies that my talk is in English, my German is appalling, so bear with me. What I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon is really to get us to start thinking about the people who work in tourism. Now, I think later on this afternoon you're going to be hearing from various people about different contexts about work and jobs and employment and labour, and what this means for the future and how the way that tourism is changing and shaping the nature of work. So you've got some really excellent examples from around the globe. So I thought what I would do this afternoon is to start off with an overview, really. So something quite general to get us really thinking about tourism, human resources, or put another way, really thinking about people that work in tourism. Now, I'm going to do this in 4 steps. Something, scene setting, say something about human resource considerations, what I think is important for a destination success, then a summary, and then some concluding thoughts. Okay, so it's a simple presentation. I'm a simple woman, so I keep it that way. Okay, but that's the 4 things that I'm going to be talking you through this afternoon. Now, just really by way of scene setting, in the context, and I've got 2 slides, and you don't need the detail, but the first slide reminds us why tourism employment is important. Now, we've got lots of tourism statistics. You can treat statistics with caution, you can do what you with them, but essentially 1 in 10 jobs is in tourism. So it's a really important economic sector. What we have to remember is that it's really the primary reason for developing tourism. We don't invite tourists for the fun of it. We invite tourists because it's an economic sector and it gives people jobs and wealth and employment. So I think that's the first thing to remind ourselves of, that this is a really important sector for livelihoods and employment generation. So that's my first slide. The second slide, by way of scene setting, reminds us how important people are to our industry and our sector. It's significant that it's our people that are really the cutting edge of tourism. They're the thing that makes the difference between our products and services. We all know that you can have the fanciest hotel or the best tourist attraction or the best airline, but without the best people to work for you and do the jobs, then your product will not shine, it will not stand out. So the second thing is a reminder of this relationship between the people we employ, the people that work in tourism, and their significance that differentiates our product. So that's by way of scene setting. So it's a really important sector, it generates jobs. People within that sector are absolutely crucial, and quite often they come last down that tourism planning pile, but they're significant. So that's by way of introduction. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what I need you to do, a bit of audience participation, is I need you to use your imagination. And what I'd like you to do is think about a place that you know well, a tourist destination that you know well. Now that might be Vienna, if this is your hometown. It might be somewhere beautiful on the Maldives that you visited once. It might be London, maybe. But think of a destination that you know well. Now you can close your eyes if you want, if it helps, but no falling asleep, I will notice. Think of that destination, and I want you to think about it with all its infrastructure. I want you to think about how you get there, the roads, the rail, the airport. I'd like you to think about its attractions, what there is to do when you get there. I'd like you to think about the restaurants, the bars, the entertainment, everything that you love about that destination. So imagine that destination and think about all the things that comprise it, except it's got no people in it. It has no human resources, it has no tourism and hospitality workers. So that destination, to keep in your mind, has everything apart from people. And what we're going to do for the remainder of the session is fill that destination with people. And I'm going to give you some things that I think are important today and in the future as to what we have to think about if we've got a blank destination. What would we do to fill it full of people? So this is the second part. What are the human resource issues to consider in order to contribute towards a successful tourism destination? There are many. I've chosen 6. And see what you think. So these are my 6 things that I think we need to think about to populate our destination, our ideal destination. Now the first thing is to think holistically. It's to think of our people in that destination and to think of all of them. And if that sounds a bit strange, what I mean by this is we think about jobs in tourism that are very familiar to us. Jobs that are contracted, they have formal engagement, they're very recognisable to us. If you think of people on the front desk here, you think of cab drivers, they're instantly recognisable to us as employees of tourism and hospitality. But there's a secondary group that are less obvious. And that's the people who make a living from tourism. And they're often informal, they're often not protected by the sector, they're often doing things that we don't really think of as part of our industry, but they are crucial to a tourist destination. So if we want our destination to be successful, we need to think of both sets of people, those who are contracted, formal, the obvious jobs that we see, but also those many people who make a living from tourism but don't necessarily appear on the radar. So that's my number 1. We think about everybody when we're filling our destination with its workforce. Number 2 is we're mindful of the decent work agenda. Now, if you're familiar with the International Labour Organization and the UNWTO, you will know that they work collaboratively to try and improve the rights of workers in tourism. Now, the ILO, founded just after the end of the First World War, is really looking at decent work, and it said if we want long-lasting peace on our planet, one of the things we could do is to make sure people are treated well at work. That was one of the provisos of the ILO. So the decent work agenda was the International Labour Organisation's manifesto, if you like, about how we would treat people who work universally, not just in tourism and hospitality. The International Labour Organisation teamed up with the World Tourism Organisation to look specifically about the treatment of people in our sector. There's a lot of literature about this. The one up here is, I think, one of the most user-friendly ones, and it's the guidelines on the decent work agenda for tourism. And it's really a collaboration between those 2 organisations saying this is what we could do to improve the lot of our workers. Now, I don't have time to talk a lot about the decent work agenda, but if it's not familiar to you, this slide up here just gives you some of the areas that it covers. And what it's trying to do is give a holistic view of improving employment practices. So things like fair pay, equal treatment, decent hours, stability of work, a voice at work, all of the things that we may take for granted but are not necessarily evident throughout the globe. So that's my second thing. So we've got thinking about everybody, we've got filling our destination mindful of the principles of the decent work agenda. Number 3. Just to think about green jobs. Now this one's a little bit controversial because you're either sold on the idea that a green job exists or you're not. There's a lot of controversy and a lot of concern about the definitions of a green job. But if you look at some of the sustainability literature, essentially a green job is almost universally defined as one that contributes to preserving the environment. And it's in some of those traditional sectors and less traditional sectors, but a green job is anything that looks essentially about safeguarding the environment. Okay, what does that mean for tourism, if that's a little bit vague? Green jobs in tourism largely centred around energy and waste reduction, so transport jobs, hotels, accommodation. What can they do to provide cleaner, greener employment in those sectors? And then secondly, tourism jobs are really associated around preserving the environment. And I guess here we're thinking more about jobs in conservation or habitat maintenance or ecotourism. Some of the money that tourism gets spent on directly looked at employment related to preserving the environment. Now, as I say, green jobs are controversial because they're not unanimously agreed. But could we, when we're thinking about our tourism destination, do our best to make sure that those jobs we create have some of those green credentials in mind? Okay? That's my 3. With me so far? Okay. Number 4. For our tourism destination, we've got to somehow attract, retrain and develop the people working for us in that destination. No tourism destination is any good without its labour. One of the perennial problems, and I've heard this time and time again in my career, is how we attract people to the sector and how we keep them there. We know high turnover, we know all of those things, so what can we do about it? But looking at a destination, a successful destination in the future, this is absolutely crucial. Now, if we think about the problems of attraction, they're well known to us. If any student of tourism will look at these in a textbook, it's something that employers face time and time again, that the sector has problems, not universally the same, but some of the issues that we're up against in trying to attract people to the sector, and you can see what many of those are there. And these are perennial issues. I've been talking about this for many years in tourism, and we're still faced with the same thing. But I think rather than focus on some of those negatives, real or not, perhaps alternatively we need to think about a better way of talking about our industry. It is an excellent place to learn soft skills. It is an excellent place to get a first job. It's a really good place to learn languages, to offer opportunities for mobility. Actually, some of the things that could be seen as a negative appeal to the new generation who are not necessarily looking for a job for life. They're looking for a job where they can learn different types of skills and meet different types of people. So actually we could be quite good at that. We've got flexibility in our sector and within our employment opportunities, and really crucially, low barriers to entry. Anyone pretty much can start off working in tourism and hospitality and learn as they go along. And rather than that being a negative, that's actually crucially important, but we perhaps don't do very well at selling ourselves. Then retaining, a perennial problem again. What can we do? Well, I think as a sector we need to think quite seriously about what opportunities we're offering our workforce, and that might be through traditional HR programs like talent management. Certainly corporate social responsibility is coming more and more into how people are thinking about whether they want to stay and work for a particular organisation. And elements around employee engagement. And our millennials, our younger generation, are telling us it's not all about pay. And that might be just because they can't see that they'll ever be well paid. But there are other things that are important to people. So perhaps for our destination of the future, we need to be talking to the younger generation about what they might value. So retaining people is crucial. Education's vital, of course I'm going to say that. I'm a professor of tourism. Education at all levels and throughout people's career, and that doesn't necessarily mean a formal university or tertiary education. But I think we have to recognise that our labour market needs different types of education, and it needs us to be responsive, and perhaps in the past we haven't done too well at doing that. So a range of educational opportunities that might be employment-based, they might be online, they might be through distance learning, but they should be open to people throughout their careers as part of that engaging people to stay in the sector. So that's my number 4, to attract and retain and develop people within the sector. Okay, number 5. In our destination, I would say we've got to really think about employee well-being. Now in the UK, there's a strong voice at the moment which is talking about looking after people's well-being at work. And it might be just because it's costing the NHS so much money, if you're going to be cynical, but it might be that actually we're beginning to think that people spend a lot of time at work and a lot of their lives at work, if they're lucky. And what we do at work, what we do in our jobs, has a direct influence on our health. So the UK has a public policy agenda to look at very specifically health in the workplace. And this is quite new for the UK. I don't know of your situation here. And employee well-being is a really interesting thing because there's a lot of evidence that suggests what's good for us and what isn't good for us at work. This is not evidence from tourism, this is evidence from the medical sector, this is evidence from nursing and public health. And there are many conditions that all the evidence says are not actually very good for you. And if you have elements of this in your job, you may well be subject to poorer health as opposed to somebody who doesn't. And what you can see on the slide there is some examples of things that might make your health be worse in an employment context. And if you look at those in relation to the slide on tourism characteristics, you'll see there are some similarities. So insecure work, monotonous work, work that involves a lot of sitting or standing or is physically hard work, work where you feel you have no autonomy, work where you feel you're not particularly well treated, all of those things, the evidence says from the medical practitioners are not good for you. Contrary, we know that work is good for us. People in employment tend to have better health than those not. So the evidence says work's good for you, but there are caveats. How are we going to encourage our employers to think about work and well-being? Because it has direct impacts for your organisation. Direct impacts on staff turnover, reduced stress levels, sickness and absence, money you spend on hiring, and if you're being really ruthless, higher productivity. So the evidence suggests a healthy, happy workforce, guess what, gives you more for your return. So no surprise, except that for the first time in the UK, we're starting to take that evidence seriously. Now, what people always say is, well, what can we do? You know, organisations don't have money to spend on employee wellbeing, it's hugely expensive. But I would urge you to consider otherwise, because yes, there are lots of things we can do to help people's health at work, but what's really interesting is the most significant one costs nothing. So if I give this talk to a bunch of industry managers, I always get angry looks at this point, we can't do anything about employee health. It costs too much, and it's not true. Actually, the evidence says that what most people want out of work is a culture they feel comfortable in, good leadership, i.e. they know what they're doing, and really good communication. Because what most people don't like at work is not knowing what they're supposed to do. So if people have got good communication, they know what's expected of them, the culture is supportive, all the evidence says that has the biggest impact on employee health. So that's my number 5, employee wellbeing, is our destination can think about what people feel when they come to work and their subsequent health. Last one, number 6. It's a focus on the unique. And I often think about tourism, and I'm very lucky to have been travelling a while now and visited many places, and I often think, you know, if I fell out of a spaceship and didn't know where I was going to land, would I be able to tell? You know, if I dropped into Vienna and didn't know it was Vienna, how quickly would I be able to work out it was Vienna? If I dropped into New York, would I know? If I dropped into the Atacama Desert, would I know? I always think, because of, you know, globalisation and information, are we all becoming the same? And my honest view is yes and no. And one of the things that I think is really crucial in tourism destinations is the people. And often it's the people that let you know and give you a clue as to where we are. So unique or all the same. But the evidence is telling us that what people are valuing in tourism is authenticity. And services and experiences based around the authentic. Now, again, open to interpretation, not always easy to see. But is it our workforce, is it our people that give us that authenticity, that give us the difference and make somebody say, hey, you're in Vienna, you're not in Munich? Is there a difference, or are we all the same? I think we're actually different. How am I doing for time? I've not got a red card yet, so I must be able. So to summarise, here it is in a nutshell. So a human resource perspective encourages us to first consider human resources from a holistic perspective. Second, take account international policy and guidelines that facilitate the decent treatment of people at work. Third, to embrace the green economy. Fourth, to be successful, destinations have to consider how to attract, retrain and develop human resource capacity. Fifth, to take care of our employees. And finally, successful tourism destinations might consider what's unique about their people, what's unique about their workforce. This can be turned into something that's really positive and I think gives competitive advantage in a globalised world. Okay, so if you've kept your destination in mind, we've got this future opportunity to fill it full of a workforce. If we can do some or any of those things that I've suggested, maybe this would help us for the future of that tourism workforce. So some concluding thoughts. We didn't really see this coming, and it's hit us as a bit of a surprise, but I think one of the things that my research and what I'm looking more at now is around the sharing and the collaborative economy. Because this has really shaken up and changed the way that people are employed or make a living from tourism. It's probably been one of the biggest changes I've seen in the last 20 years of my research. And is it a really good thing? Or is it actually something that's taking us a step backwards towards more precarious work? And it depends which side, who you are and which side you sit on. But is the sharing economy actually saying, well, this is fantastic, this has given us real opportunities and real freedom of choice for many people to get engaged in the sector who wouldn't have done before? Or do we say, actually, this is a new type of precarious labour because it's not protected, it's not contracted, and it doesn't have some of the same legislations and guidelines that other jobs do. So I think the jury's out, but certainly the sharing economy and who's actually working as part of that labour force has given us something to think about. Leading on to that is really what digital labour platforms are doing to our sector, but from my perspective, more importantly, what they're doing to our employees. And again, really changing the nature of that working relationship. Now, I'm no IT expert, so I have to draw on other people's expertise if I'm going too far down this route. But essentially, we are no longer geographically constrained with our labour markets. And you can work and do work remotely, you can do work from anywhere to anywhere. You can be an invisible workforce, and who's looking after you? So some thoughts around the digital labour platforms, and it seems to me that we are relatively in uncharted waters. We know the effect it's having on the industry, but we're not really yet talking about the effect it's having on work and employment in the sector. And then some final thoughts, and I thought because we are really thinking about the future of work, and what are some of those future issues. Now the first one is a personal thing, and for me this is improved employment statistics. I know we've got statisticians speaking after me, but one of the things that's very hard about my job is to actually get decent statistics about the employment and workforce in the tourism and hospitality sectors. And it means that we're a little bit vulnerable if we don't have good data to work with. Ethics and CSR, I think, are becoming more prominent, and I say this because our students tell me, and they tell me that's what will make them work for one company rather than another. They tell me this is what they look for in an employment contract. So ethics and CSR are really significant, I think, in our contemporary and future work. Workers' rights and protection, and I say this because I think the lawyers are just beginning to look at what work in the sharing economy and what work on digital labour platforms looks like. So I think that debate around rights and protection and who actually is an employer will become more to the forefront. Certainly in the UK, the lawyers are on it, so you can pretty much guess that anything else will follow. And then really importantly, career development and prospects, whatever that means. And it might be that careers are really very different to how we've thought about them traditionally. So maybe careers is the wrong word. Maybe really we're about developing human capital for that individual in whatever way that suits them, rather than more formalised programmes. So there are 4 future issues for you to think about. So, no more English. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ladkin. We have a few minutes left now. Is there a question at this moment? You will join us also later at the discussion. So
I have a philosophy, it's that nobody ever hates you for finishing early.
That's right, maybe we need the minutes later.
Yeah, I'm on the panel this afternoon, so happy to chat or take questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ladkin. Let's switch back to German.